Thank you very much for that introduction. Always a pleasure to speak with colleagues at the United Nations. I worked for many years there until I left, and now I'm at Johns Hopkins University, where I head up this new department, but still consult with some UN entities to work on using emerging technologies for a lot of the UN's mission. I'll start by I never would have imagined that in 2014, when I started experimenting with VR at the UN, that this would happen, that there would now be these sort of courses that a lot of young people would want to take, all designed around not only using VR, but emerging technologies in general. And these are just some of like where this can go. At its very core, VR is the ability to transport you, teleport you into another reality and allow you to kind of escape your world and go somewhere else and hopefully understand a situation or a context very differently. I'm sure there's more technical explanations, but at a very simple thing, you can just put on a headset and you can be in another world. And I'm sure there are better definitions, but I'm going to stick with that one. Why virtual reality at the UN? I'm sure, like many of you, you're all very passionate. We're all very passionate about what the UN does, and we wish that more people would understand it or care about it. And I always felt that I'd worked on a lot of reports. I would do a lot of analytical work, and sometimes it just was not coming through. I really wished people would understand it. And when I say people understand it, I want people in the public at large to understand the work of the UN. But a lot of times it would be member states as well, because we would work with. When I was working, I was working with something called the MDG Advocacy Group, and we had the new Prime Minister of Norway. And you have to really get someone up to speed about what the context is like on the ground. And I felt virtual reality was something that would help someone understand something in a new way. When I was there in the early 2010s, I know it sounds weird, maybe almost 10 years ago, you could see that something was shifting. Our traditional ways of getting the message out usually is with a lot of celebrities. And I really felt that, we had all these bloggers, these influencers, things on the internet where people were having more influence than ever before, and that we needed to embrace new technologies in some ways. And just at like a browse at some of the YouTube channel, maybe it's better now, but it was something where I felt that it was a missed opportunity. We obviously had these digital tools, but we just weren't getting the engagement that we would want. And I think the best way, I forgot to do something, Joanna. Sorry, 1 second. Give me 1 second. I am making a mess. Sorry, 1 second. 1 second, Joanna.
All right.
Things were going so great, and then I remembered I didn't put the sound thing on.
And they will go back to being great.
Okay, so rather than, I just wanted to play this 2-minute video, which should have the sound on it. And if it doesn't, please let me know. And this video really is a case study about what was the first use of virtual reality at the United Nations with a film I created called Clouds Over Cedra. And I co-created it with Chris Milk, who had a lot of proprietary technology at the time that now is a lot more open. And it really just gives you a sense of what we tried to achieve and what the idea was. So I think it's best if we just do that. I'll play that.
According to the United Nations, the number of countries struggling with humanitarian crises is at an all-time high. The international community hasn't experienced this many refugees, asylum seekers, and displaced persons since World War II. But how do we galvanize policymakers who are sometimes so far removed from the world's crises? The United Nations needed a new tool to amplify empathy, which is why UN advisor Gabo Aurora and Verse creator Chris Milk teamed up to create a VR experience from the perspective of 12-year-old Syrian refugee named Citra. Of the millions who have fled the Syrian civil war, over 84,000 have taken up temporary residence in the Zaatari refugee camp in Jordan, without any clear indication of when they can go home. In order to communicate this ongoing frustration, Verse captured Sidra's story with the aid of Verse's proprietary 360-degree camera technology. The footage was then stitched together using Verse Tools software and made ready in time for the World Economic Summit in Davos. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and Emma Watson were among the dignitaries backing the launch of Clouds Over Sidra. The film was experienced by over 120 global leaders who all experienced Sidra's refugee camp through her eyes. Donations to the Syrian refugee effort have skyrocketed since the rollout of Clouds. The piece also screened at Sundance, South by Southwest, the TED Talks, and the Third International Humanitarian Appeal for Syria, which was held in Kuwait. Countless humanitarian advocates, policymakers, and the general public have experienced Sidra's story. Clouds Over Sidra is the first in a series of collaborations between Verse and the UN. With demand for touching VR experiences on the rise, the UN has found its empathy machine.
Well, I'm going to stop there, and I'll just say that, honestly, I'm crying inside this. This is probably one of the most vivid experiences of my life.
Okay, so that gives you, was that everyone able to hear that okay?
Sound was loud and clear, thank you.
Fantastic. You know, so that was really like the kind of launch off point of, you know, of what I felt was the power of virtual reality. And I think it's important to think of virtual reality as just a whole new medium, and a medium that will help us understand each other, and also war, conflict, a lot of other things. You know, many people would say the role of photographs with World War I changed our relationship to violence and what was happening. Vietnam with television, Syria with user-generated YouTube footage. The Black Lives Matter movement even had some Facebook Live sort of, you know, violence and other things that were there. And, you know, it's just to think about, this is going to be a whole new way that we are going to interact with a lot of what we're used to in a flat dimension. And, you know, there's many people I recommend reading, but, you know, if you just, I think Susan Sontag, who wrote On Photography, but also Regarding the Pain of Others, you know, really examines photography in a way to kind of understand its relationship with in developing empathy with other people. And there's a lot of critique. And I think a lot of it is what we need to start doing with virtual reality, because I think it opens up like even a greater dimension where you are part of a story and you have different agency. So it's a lot more active. It's a lot more interactive. And, you know, some of the things that I've shown you in you know, some of the 360, that's maybe not as interactive. You can look around, but VR is consistently becoming much more and more interactive, where you can go into a story, you can engage with characters, but at a very minimum, it is going to be that you are inside a film. So, you know, we really, you know, at that point, you know, what was fascinating is that we were starting to use it to, and it's still being used, if I'm not mistaken, by UNICEF with their face-to-face fundraisers, because we did show this sort of experience at Davos. And then at some point we said, you know, can we integrate it with something that exists already? And UNICEF, you know, stops people on the street and has these face-to-face fundraisers, which is a big part of their fundraising efforts around the world in 40 different countries and 15 different languages. So we really, you know, decided to kind of, we can play this one really quick, hopefully it works.
The girl in the video was only like a few years younger than me, and the boys running around were my brother's age.
It gave me a real sense of appreciation for what I've got here.
I felt as if I was actually there, and I could actually feel the pain of the children and their suffering.
Made the people seem so alive, and I think that's really important with this. The people have to be alive in order for change to happen.
It was something that I don't want to believe is happening, but I can't ignore it anymore.
I knew about what was going on, but I didn't really know the extent of everything that happened there.
Open one arm and then the other, and then walk towards a person and then hug them.
What are you doing? Like, why are basic human rights still being denied in the 21st century? Why are there still people falling falling dead on the streets. Why do humans feel the need for war?
My sorrow is one based on, me coming to school when it's raining. For them, it's not even being able to go to school.
Yeah, it really makes you feel for what's happening in that situation.
They said that it will come.
I think that is an important thing, that where we were able to get some results right away. Usually 1 in 12 people donate on the street when they're stopped by someone from UNICEF. And we saw it consistently throughout many countries. We piloted it in New Zealand, but then across all countries, very interestingly enough, it consistently doubled donations. And I think that's really where you see the power of what this medium could do. They wouldn't have done that if it's just a YouTube video if you showed them or any other way, but it was also very efficient. You're able to do it. The regular film is about 8.5 minutes. I cut a 2-minute version that really took some main scenes and kept like the main sort of emotive aspects. And we're able to kind of, get some really good results. And then the project has been integrated, in refugee integration in Canada, using it as a kind of way to, counter some, xenophobia. And there's a lot that you can go forward with. And it's been, I think the sort of results have been great. And this is a little bit from the film, but so, the main thing to think about is, whenever I present this within this context, and when I did 5 years ago, I think people felt really enamored by the technology because it is very new. And I would always say it's not just the technology, it's the storytelling that goes with the technology. It's the creativity that goes with it. We were able to, you can watch a lot of these on the Within app. We can send you the information if you have a headset. A lot of these are publicly available. There was a series that we did on Syria, on Ebola, this is a scene from Gaza, working with people to tell stories there. And I would always say that we were able to tell stories in very new ways that would challenge just broader UN storytelling. For example, with Clouds Over Sidra, we had a scene where Sidra cries, and UNICEF had very strict rules, generally that you don't show children crying. But then, we were able to go with it. They realized that it was something new and different. And I think as a result of it, getting a new grammar of storytelling within VR and relaxing some of our rigid rules with storytelling, and allowing it to be more creative, I think allowed something special to happen. And I think something special happened because they're like, is this going to be on the internet? I was like, no, it's just in a headset. And they were like, great, do whatever you want. So, this is from Gaza, a little bit working with people and their generosity. These stories have been only incredible because people have co-created them with us and collaborated with us to do it. And, we were able to get a lot of good buzz from it. But, I just want to shift a little bit because, I want us to think about the relationship that this has with creativity and art. And I know that's not something that we always think about, but I think there's a merger that we can make to understand that a lot of artists have been influenced by technology and have been some of the earliest pioneers of using these technologies to kind of have a new form of expression. And I think that's kind of where I've come from it, is to be able to use it with artists in a way so that you can have that creativity sandbox. So you don't have to be artists yourselves if you're going to do it, but you should have that artistic mentality that we need to be able to explore. You need to be able to make mistakes. You need to just do things because you're not sure where they're going to go, but you need to have that space to create and foster things. So, Kraftwerk created their own tools because they wanted to express themselves in new ways, and they created something like a sequencer that now, is so common in pop music and so common in the music industry and common in tools like Ableton and other things that they, pioneered that have changed the face of how we think about music and our world. This is just, I had to play this because it's just my son with a Magic Leap headset. We're talking mostly about virtual reality, but there's also things with augmented reality where you can put things in the space. You could just see, like young people especially, they're just digital native. They get it. He's building a forest in the dining room. So, you know, there are going to be, you know, ways that we can, you know, engage and understand so much about ourselves. You know, usually when you watch something that's flat, you either put a like or a comment, but, you know, now we will be able to know when you are able to integrate your biometrics, your eye tracking, your emotions. There are going to be ethical things about privacy data and everything that come in. And I do think about that with a young son myself, because a lot of the ethical issues that we do have with social media and privacy and Google, these are the same companies that are investing heavily in this. And I think we need to realize that there is going to be a whole new realm of data. But what I'm trying to show with this also is, this is the other ways you can engage people in a multi-sensorial way. Not only will you get more reaction, but you will have an ability to engage people in totally different ways than you would with regular media. And, you know, I want to say that, you know, there's a lot of things where if you check the regular news, you know, VR is dead, no one cares about VR, headsets aren't selling. And, you know, if you look at Google Trends, I think you can see the interest over time from 2004 to, you know, up to where we are. And, you know, VR has had many sort of lives. In the 90s, there was a big sort of kickoff of interest from a lot of things with pioneers like Jaron Lanier and, you know, a lot of scholars like Mel Slater. A lot of people have been working on this for many, many years. And it's only, I think, around 2014, 2015, where you were starting to have more consumer grade headsets that were able to be sold. So there was a spike in interest. And again, things might be plateauing a bit because, you know, it takes a little while for new technologies to really take hold, but it doesn't mean that they're still not powerful and engaging. And especially for the UN's work, I think they're particularly relevant because it's not just in storytelling or communication. It can also be in trainings. It can also be in how one understands data. You know, there's a million ways, and I think our other colleagues will show other examples of that. But, you know, at the same time, you might have a little plateau with our interest, but if you go to Google Scholar and you just look at how much VR is being referenced in an academic setting, in a research setting, it's going higher and higher. And it's why I decided to move into academia, because I do think some of this has to be researched and supported in that context. And especially with that setting, I think, you know, you'll see that there is definitely not a lull, there's only a boom in that way. And, you know, I gave the example of craft work, but, you know, again, you know, it's amazing what artists can do. This is during, you know, the Impressionist period in the late 1800s. And because of the Industrial Revolution in tin, people could now go out into the fields for the first time. They didn't have to be in their studios. They could kind of paint for the first time, being outside with their easels where their paint would not dry up. And that might seem trivial, but it's not, because that led to Impressionism, and it led to an ability for us to understand and appreciate reality better. So again, it's the role of artists and creativity. You don't have to be an artist, but I think you need to have that mindset. This is the Samsung Gear. This is what people were using in that video you saw where UNICEF's taking it to the streets. This is what's allowed it to not be in a laboratory. But again, you know, we've been able to go outside, and this is all accelerating at a way that's, I think, very, very exciting. On a final note, you know, I just want to make, I know we talk a lot about innovation, and this is the innovation unit, and, you know, I remember the buzzword of innovation, but it's important that, you know, creativity is not innovation. And maybe that's something we can discuss a little bit, but it's important that, like, an innovation is something that we use it to kind of, in almost in a utilitarian sense, where we know it can help our industry or what we're doing, and it's changing the way we work, or it's making it better. And that can happen, but I think you need a period of creativity. You need a period of experimentation that allows people to do things without a real end in mind, you know? And I think that's kind of where a lot of these technologies really show amazing growth and amazing work, is where you're able to do that. And my work since then has consistently tried to just kind of see, well, that's interesting. Let's just go in many different directions. and try to tell a story with it. And that's the lens that we think we've been able to create innovation. But I think that's something to keep in mind, that there is a distinction in that way. So that's it. That's the talk. I hope I was on time. And I hope that was helpful to you.